Hello there. There's truly a lot of these Russian Advanced Persistent Threat Groups, or APTs, that is, national cyber spies. It's very likely we only know of a few of them. Those we do know of work under different services, handling both intelligence like SVR, the Foreign Intelligence Service, and counterintelligence, FSB, or Federal Security Service. Some of these groups use not very fancy methods, focusing largely on the quantity of targets. An example would be Gamaredon, which I've talked about previously. Others attack only the most important targets of the highest value, just like Turla, also known as Ouroboros or Pensive Ursa, in an entirely different nomenclature. They have a ton of these names, so for today, for simplicity's sake, we'll use the codename Turla. They target journalists, enemy state institutions, or research institutes, while aiming to remain undetected as long as possible. You know, they're actual proper spies. All of these groups are followed by various researchers, including ESET, which recently published a couple of reports on the topic. The most interesting one casts a new light on an aspect that, up until now, remained unknown. But we'll get to that in a minute. To learn more, I've asked my ESET informant, Tony Anscombe, a couple of questions. This material was made in cooperation with ESET and DAGMA IT Security, cybersecurity professionals. So let's get to those questions. What even is Turla?
Turla are best known for their espionage, and if you look at their history, the espionage goes into European governments, diplomats, the Middle East, etc. In Turla's case, it's often unknown how somebody actually infiltrates. So the original compromise is often unknown because in a lot of cases, these compromises are what I define as non-malicious. And when I say that, they are malicious because, of course, they're not wanted. What I mean by that is they're not deploying malware or they're not doing anything that might get noticed. Turla are what I define as the true spies. They want to sit somewhere, they want to sit and listen, they want to gather information, gather data, and that's actually their motivation is longevity and being somewhere over a long period of time.
But how do they even know this? How do they penetrate the victim's systems? What are their targets?
They're compromising somebody's network and then they're deploying tools in that network that give them longevity and want to be hidden. And that's primarily what they're doing. Now, they have a series of tools. One of them, Kazuar. And now that tool allows them to monitor and exfiltrate data. So in effect, it's a listening tool. They deploy that tool into somebody's system and they can listen for things going on the device. They can listen for traffic on the device and they can exfiltrate data as needed to command and control servers or to other systems. Now, there are different ways of exfiltrating that data. Are they encrypting it? Are they not encrypting it? Are they using commercial systems to take that out? What I mean by commercial systems, are they using public source like Dropbox or whatever, etc. So there's lots of different ways that you can actually move that data out.
Kazuar is a tool used exclusively by Turla and was probably made by them as well. Currently, its third iteration has been observed while its beginnings date to at least 2016. It's an advanced tool used to spy on high-level victims, so it's not seen that often. The targets are government units, diplomats, or enemy military. Kazuar collects a ton of information about the attacked system, steals credentials, chat history, including from secure communicators, enables executing commands on the infected machine, and much more. But how do we know who is using it? And who is the target?
As ESET, we only use other people's attribution. So the reason I say that is we'll attribute to a group and then other people attribute to where that group might belong. And widely the industry attributes that to being part of the FSB. Turla is very focused on Europe, the Middle East, and parts of Asia. However, Gamaredon is focused primarily on Ukraine. Gamaredon is attributed to being another group within the FSB, but it's also attributed of actually running out of occupied Crimea. So their target and their focus clearly is Ukraine.
Do such groups cooperate with each other in any way? Do they specialize in something? Or maybe they have something to do with ransomware gangs?
We recently published a piece of research, and I just want to call out the researchers. Always important to Matthew Fau and Zoltan Rusnak did an amazing piece of research recently and have presented it actually at a couple of cyber conferences. But let's talk about specifically what they found, because I think that will answer your question on whether they're actually collaborating, which is very unusual, by the way. You tend not to see different groups, even within the same nation states, collaborating, and we can conspiracy theory that in after we've explained what they've been doing. What we found was a number of instances specifically in Ukraine, where actually Gamaredon and Turla seem to have been cooperating. And I say cooperating rather than working together, right? Because it would appear that Gamaredon did some very specific tasks for or to enable Turla. Now, if we think about commercial cyber criminals just for a moment, you tend to find, in a ransomware attack, we always hear about the ransomware gangs at the end. But, there are access brokers at the start, there are affiliates in the middle, and then you get to the ransomware gangs. The media do a very bad job of explaining the first two bits. I would term for simplicity that Gamaredon do the first piece. They're the access broker. They're very good at doing the spear phishing and spoofing emails from the sender or compromising accounts. So they're good at doing the incursion, the piece at the start. Now, Turla, who are good at doing the sitting in a network undetected and sitting there quietly exfiltrating that data and monitoring and looking and doing the espionage piece, these two are a natural match. Because if you've got one that's good at getting in and one that's good at hiding, then if you put these two together, then obviously you have, I would say a perfect marriage, but maybe we shouldn't call it a perfect marriage. But so it's not. My point is, it's not surprising actually that they are working together because there are different skill sets.
All right then, but are there any examples observed in the real world, or are these just suspicions or reading from the tea leaves?
What we saw was a number of different instances. Now, the first one is where actually it appears that Gamaredon's tools were used to restart a version, a Kazuar, for Turla. And bear in mind, Gamaredon in somewhere like Ukraine has hundreds and thousands of incursions. So they're probably sitting on lots of people's networks. They've got the access and they've got the credentials, etc., to get into these networks. So when you see them deploy something that then restarts something for somebody else, I was going to say it's nearly like somebody created a support ticket saying, does somebody know how to get into restart my crashed service? And somebody else has turned and said, yes, I know how to restart that. We'll do it for you. Where is it? And maybe it is that simple. Maybe it's a discussion around a coffee machine. Who knows how these things, how espionage in these ways happen? But clearly, it was used to restart. Now, in the other cases, it's slightly different. So actually, the deployment of Turla was after Gamaredon's incursion. So there are different uses. Now, this is limited. I will say that. So this is limited to 4 or 5 cases that we've seen this happening. And in different tools have been used at different times. So in TerraGraphing and TerraPaste used in some of these attacks. So we're seeing different tooling used, which are Gamaredon tooling. It's interesting to see how these two groups are actually working together. Now, what caused it? Is that two researchers standing by the coffee machine having the discussion? Is that two researchers who happen to know each other? One thing that people in in this type of community are good at doing is collaborating, sharing some tools here and there. So it could be as simple as that, or is it somebody much further up the chain who's turned around and said, "Well, hang on a minute, you've got this group who's doing a really good job here. Maybe they can be helping this group who are after the longevity, and this group, by the way, have access to some of the places that actually this more sophisticated group, Turla, want to actually get into." So maybe it's further up the chain. Maybe it's as simple as two researchers. That is unfortunately just speculation, though.
But can we observe over the passing years how these groups and thus the tools they use are evolving? Is anything actually changing in this regard?
Well, obviously, the cooperation is a change in behaviour. Have we seen any other change in tactics? Well, all malware and all of these groups evolve. Somebody creates something and then they said, no, they're just like software vendors. They create a piece of software and then this software evolves, it creates new features and it evolves into something else. So, for example, if you look at Gamaredon, they've been, some of what they do could be seen as quite basic. So, the spear phishing and things like that, and the movement between devices using USB drives and stuff. But if you look at how they've moved to using dead drop services, they've started hiding their infrastructure behind tunneling, using things like Cloudflare, etc., which of course means, and if you look, they used to flip their IP address, switch their IP address on a frequent basis, even hourly or multiple hourly. Now, those type of tactics are, to me, just an evolution. What they're doing is somebody is version 1 becomes version 2, and then version 2 becomes version 3, etc. So you see natural evolution there. The evolution of them working together is new. It's leveraging the skill sets of either group to get to where they want to be.
Okay, Tony, but these are technical matters. Does anything change in the way these operations are conducted in the first place?
Through that evolution, you also get automation. So if you've now got two groups and they've got different skill sets and they're doing different things, and then you've got evolutions of software, i.e. version 2, 3, etc. If you look at all software over the last, and I'm talking both hacking software, so rogue software, malicious software like this, and legitimate software, one thing that happens is automation. So through automation, you get greater quantity. And through greater quantity, you could argue that that would actually meet the word you used, intensification. Because what you're doing is you're attacking more people in the same amount of time with the same amount of people you always had. Now, is that intensifying the attacks? Yes. But it's also a natural evolution. It's not that they're intensifying, it's that technology is allowing them to intensify.
If the number of targets rises, then who and what are they actually? Is it mostly critical infrastructure? We often hear about this in the media. Is this even true? Why is it done at all? It's not like there's ever been any massive consequences as a result.
Bear in mind, Gamaredon is kind of a bit broad. I mean, like I say, there's hundreds of different places where they are attempting to spearfish, fish, socially engineer, etc. Whereas Turla is much more focused. But as we know, I mean, critical infrastructure always is a key target, and it's an interesting question, isn't it? Because we see critical infrastructure in a conflict zone like this being targeted very specifically, and we've seen certain energy companies or certain energy attacks over the period of time. So you may remember, back in 2016, we were the people that took apart InDestroyer, the ICS malware, and we've seen that again in 2022, and we've seen other instances against power grids, as have some other cybersecurity companies. Some of them public and some of them not so public. So there are some we can talk about and some we can't. So critical infrastructure is, and this type of attack goes alongside it. If I pick up a newspaper this morning, which makes me sound very old-fashioned, doesn't it? A newspaper. If I read in the news, I can certainly see that a focus is on destroying critical infrastructure or disrupting critical infrastructure. And I think that's important to understand. It's about disruption to society, disruption to production, manufacturing, etc., etc., etc. Is there a target? Yeah, I mean, critical infrastructure is always going to be a target in a conflict zone. Now, interestingly, if you step away from the conflict zone and look in other places in the world, why don't we see cyber attacks that take down power grids in other countries, etc., etc.? I think all of these groups are jostling for position. They want the ability to do something, but they don't do it because if they do it, then the other side is going to attack them back. Because we tend to only talk about this in one direction, of attacks against us. But remember that the capabilities are going in the other direction too. And in fact, just this week, I think, while we were recording this, in fact, it may have been at the end of last week, China accused the NSA of attacking the timing.
server.
The time servers in China. Now, somebody might turn and say, so what? The clock might be out. Well, telecommunication systems, finance systems, manufacturing, transport systems all run off of that time clock. So actually having the ability to change it could cause major disruption. My point here is nobody actually goes and it's very rare you actually see somebody doing something or breaking something in critical infrastructure in this way, but you often hear of them being in there. And I think that's an interesting one. Whereas in Ukraine, obviously, it's a different case because actually being in there and doing something in a conflict zone furthers somebody's actions against Ukraine, unfortunately.
Do you observe this outside of Ukraine, outside of Europe? I'm talking about situations where this had a real impact on society. Or is this outcome reserved for cyber criminals?
There was one of the states in the US had what I'd define as a catastrophic event at the start of the year where their state systems were all taken down. So if you take down all the smart city infrastructure, the state infrastructure, etc., you create a catastrophic event. So you do see other examples of that. We had research published earlier this year as well about BladedFeline. You get Volt Typhoon from China. You get different attacks in lots of different places, and I think that state attack. There was a U.S. power utility in Massachusetts that had a known cyber attack as well. My point here is there are lots of these instances all around the world. Very few of them become catastrophic. However, some commercial malware, and I say commercial, what I mean by that is monetizing cyber criminals, say not nation state actors, do create catastrophic events. So certainly two catastrophic events from last year would have been Change Healthcare in the US, affecting 280 million people and affecting wide-ranging medical services over a period of time. You had CDK, one that one tends not to be so known. CDK is a piece of software that runs all car dealerships in the US. Now, interestingly, that ransomware attack was done at the end of a quarter,
which hit very hard.
Now think about so you have to think about the sales guys in car dealerships and the problem that caused. But that was quite wide range. Yeah, that was quite wide ranging. Now, have we seen a catastrophic event this year? That's actually a really good question. And before recording this, I kind of did actually start thinking about whether we have. Collins Aerospace. Recently. Is that a catastrophic event? No, it's definitely an attack against critical infrastructure, but I don't believe it was catastrophic because on the Saturday when that unfolded, Heathrow Airport, one, they demonstrated their cyber resilience. So hats off to the guys at Heathrow Airport for having a great cyber resilience plan. 13 flights were cancelled out of 650. Do I call that catastrophic? No, I call that probably a normal day at Heathrow. Uh, but my point is that this year, I'm not sure we've seen a catastrophic incident, and I say yet, and I hope we don't see one, but you never know.
To conduct operations of such wide scale, you need a lot of personnel. I wonder, Tony, how do they recruit fresh meat? Is Telegram still king when it comes to this?
I broaden that in terms of say any channel that offers some level of being anonymous is going to be a method of recruitment. You know, if somebody took Telegram off of the table tomorrow, there'd be another app, another service closely used behind it, or you push people further darker into the dark web somewhere and they'd use encrypted.
But how do we even catch these people? Do we have the methods?
You know, I'd actually go back in turn and say, if you watch any Hollywood movie over the last 50 years, the good guys always turn and say, we need to follow the money.
Yep.
And I think it's kind of that way here. You need to take the monetization out of some of this, because even in cases where you often hear the term nation state aligned, so i.e. a group is doing something on behalf of, or doing something, or their activities are aligned with. Somewhere I have a feeling money's changing hands and somebody's being paid as a contractor to go do this in that nation state aligned inference. Now, money changing hands today, it's going to be cryptocurrency, isn't it?
Most of the time.
So, you know, if we regulated cryptocurrency a bit better and made it harder for that money to move around, maybe we'd be in a better spot. But I think, unfortunately, that one's long gone and a difficult one to solve.
Can we learn anything else while we follow the money? Because money, well, tempts. For example, tempts people who find vulnerabilities. Do we lose talented pentesters to organizations with evil intentions?
If suddenly, you know, somebody that sits there and finds, for example, a vulnerability, what do they do with it? Now, a good researcher will contact the software company involved. They will do responsible disclosure in the same way, by the way, our ESET researchers do. And that responsible disclosure ends up with a piece of research at some stage, but it also ends up, prior to that piece of research, a patch, an update, time to distribute the update, and everybody's safe. Yeah. But there are legitimate companies where you can go sell the vulnerability.
Yep.
As long as you can prove, you know, have a proof of concept that it could be exploited. So you've got this monetization. Now, if you're a researcher, which path are you going down? Are you going for a bug bounty, or are you going to sell it because you'll get more money for it? And I think that grays the line as well. I think, yeah, as an industry, we would do very well at actually stopping some of the legitimate, what I define legitimate trading of vulnerabilities in this way, and pushing that piece further underground. Because if you remove some of the easy monetization, then I think you keep more people on the good side. So what I'm saying is maybe it's too easy to stray into that darker side at the moment. So we should make it harder to stray into that darker side.
I've got one of the recent reports from ESET in front of me, and it turns out that ransomware remained the biggest threat in Poland. Almost half of the surveyed companies confirmed that not only their amount rose, but also their sophistication. Are ransomware attacks somehow connected to APT group activities? What differentiates them? Maybe there are similarities between them.
Well, so I actually do think there's still quite good lines between the two, actually. Go back to what we were talking about Turla earlier on. They want to get in, they want to do espionage, they want to be unseen and unheard and undiscovered, and they want to sit there over a long period of time. A ransomware attack unfolds really quickly. They get access. They do somebody does the reconnaissance, the lateral movement around networks, finds what they want to take. Somebody exfiltrates it, and bang, they want to put the ransomware demand in there before they're discovered. So it all needs to happen quite quickly. So are there things that cross over? Yes, of course there are. If somebody creates really interesting tooling as an APT group, at some stage, the evolution on the cybercrime side, will also start using similar techniques and tactics and use some of that tooling as well. So what the sophisticated stuff created by APT groups today will transpose itself across into cybercrime at some stage. But that's kind of a natural evolution, isn't it?
Yep.
If some company appears on the market today with a software package that does X, then all the other companies that do something similar, will be doing X soon. And then somebody will work out how to do Y, and somebody will work out how to do Z, right? And that's how I'd say the two are crossing over. There are some APT groups, as we know, some APT groups from certainly North Korea do try and monetize some of their activity, and maybe that's where you do see some of that crossover that's probably more in the public domain. But I can't imagine many nation-state groups actually going down the monetization path, because I think that takes them in a very, very different path. And and that's not the stuff of spies, really, is it?
Tony, thank you for the mountain of information. We could talk like this for hours, but at some point we have to say stop. For now, I'm all out of questions. Thank you, ESET, thank you, DAGMA IT Security, the partners and sponsors of this material, for helping make this meeting happen. If you want to learn more about these topics, check out the description, where I've added links to the research we spoke about, specifically on Gamaredon and Turla, as well as the cyclical general report on APT activity, which you can find on WeLeaveSecurity.com. And that's all for today. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.